All right, so we're going to obviously discuss the impending future of Golden State making the finals and then what it means for either the franchise, the team, or even individual players if they were to win yet another ring in this last 6 year stint or 5 year stint.
It'd be number
Also, I'll
four, right?
lead.
Number four, is that right?
It'd
Ring
be
four.
four with this dynasty, but the sixth finals appearance, right, in terms of the core group. So, they're getting into, ironically, that LeBron territory where they had, a big run. I think this links with a Steph video that we did a little while ago that right now Steph clearly is their best player. They're a well-rounded team, but Steph is clearly the front-running finals MVP if there were to be, a Golden State matchup in the finals. And one of the things that's more impressive, one of the things that's been held against him is that he's been accused of front running, right? So it's really easy for him to put up some ridiculous threes when they're up by 10, 15, and he gets his stats that way. But when it actually comes really competitive and close, he is more likely to miss those, or if the defensive focuses on him, he can start to go a little bit cold. And this season, especially, maybe it's just the experience, maybe it's the age, maybe it's a combination of the both. But he's starting to hit those shots. And today was a really great example in game three where he's just hitting shot after shot throughout the game that are kind of ridiculous and, indicative of his prowess as a shooter, the greatest shooter of all time. Obviously it is really encouraging for the team because they've got kind of two tiers of this. They have their championship core of Draymond, Clay, and Steph, and they're still able to go probably for another 2, 3 years. But they've got the young guys, So Poole's obviously come out of nowhere. Kaminga, will continue to get better. Can Moody slot into the lineup? Wiseman just is sitting there, in this weird injury limbo that they either flip for an asset or they bring him into the core. They're really, that's their flexibility on that front. And I'm not sure what their cap space is, but people want to sign with Golden State irrelevant. You know what I mean? Like if they have a need of we need a 3-and-D guy, someone's going to take that 5 mil contract, 2 mil contract just to join the roster. And you do wonder about the future implications of how much longer can they go. And if this is number 4, hypothetically, then what's to say that number 5 and 6 can't come soon after? Because you look at the state of the league. Phoenix obviously was a flash in the pan, and they're not going to be the juggernaut for the next 2, 3 years. Kawhi comes back for the Clippers, but I've just never liked the Clippers as much as everyone else seems to like them. I don't see the Lakers coming back with their current roster as being that competitive. Jokic will get Murray and Porter back, but again, I don't think that changes them into a team. Utah's going to self-implode. Memphis and Minnesota are up and coming young teams, but I don't think they're going to trump them. And if I've forgotten someone, forgive me, but I think Golden State has a stranglehold on the West for a while. And so you go to the East, depending on who comes out. Boston and Miami have actually been in the Eastern Conference for a little bit. I don't trust Brooklyn, right? I don't think that works out. I think that's just some weird dynamic, and we'll probably do a KD pod at some point to talk about what the hell went wrong in his career. And obviously the Bucks are the championship contender, and without Middleton, they're perhaps in a different storyline so far. But yeah, it all of a sudden, people talked about it throughout the season, but I think it really crept up on us, and we wanted to believe other narratives. But we've almost ignored the fact that this is probably just part 2 of the dynasty, very akin to what the Bulls did in the 90s, where they took a little hiatus in the middle due to a couple of things that happened, and then they're just right back to being in the finals for 3 or 4 straight years.
It's funny you referenced the Bulls, and it's funny you used the word dynasty. I think we are watching a dynasty here that you sort of almost has flown under the radar, especially after what's happened the last couple of years because all the injuries and things like that. You could really look, props to Cleveland. They won that final, obviously, coming back down, 1-3 and came back to win that one. But the one against Toronto, obviously, was injury riddled. Okay, I think, and obviously Toronto got the job done, but KD going out, Clay going out, that's 2, of your top sort of 4 players going out there at that sort of time of the season. It's critical, as you can see already in this year's playoffs, that when you lose key players, it just changes your whole team situation. So I think though I would liken this dynasty much more to the Spurs, though. I think, you know, the Spurs obviously got 5 rings, obviously with Tim Duncan sort of leading the way there. And it was sort of spread a little bit further apart. They didn't really string them all together in a sense. They were sort of very competitive, but they had sort of, they won one, they came back, or, you know, and then maybe 2 or 3 years later, won another one, and they stretched out over these years. But I think that the way that this team was constructed is really one that is allowing them to keep winning. Okay, and I think that's the key. And you know, and the key here is like with that young talent that they've got. Obviously, they, if they go to the finals, which looks like the case this year, and if they go all the way this year, which again looks like a high probability that they can and will, as long as they remain healthy and playing this high level that they've been playing so far, that they've got 3 players there that are, and Jordan Poole included, I think is you know, 4 players, 22 and under. Okay, and the reality is that they can all play. Okay, they can all play. Kuminga, I'm real high on Kuminga. I think we've talked about him a little bit off a recording. That, you know, I love what this kid does, and his stats don't really scream that. Okay, but you know, if he can be patient, if he stays at Golden State, okay, and that's a key point there. And if they can find him more of a role, that's probably going to be important too. Is he potentially someone that will replace Draymond at some point? So then Draymond doesn't necessarily have to play 30 minutes a night. He can play 20 minutes a night. You know, is that something that Steve Kerr and the coaching staff was willing to do and transition to? And obviously Kuminga's progress obviously you know, dictates that too. You know, these sort of opportunities, including the fact that Wiseman is still going to come back. Okay, and that's a whole nother element that they haven't had this whole season. I think this team is on its way to being recognized as a greater dynasty than the Spurs. Okay, and I think things like Steph Curry, like we talked about, being recognized as potentially the greatest shooting point guard of all time. Okay, and I think there's a key definition there of a shooting point guard. So don't mix him up with a big point guard like Magic. Don't mix him up with you know, some of these other sort of scorers or slashers like Kobe, perhaps. But a shooting point guard, okay, of all time, clearly Steph's probably there already, okay, but cements that spot by, you know, head and shoulders above anyone else. I think Clay, you can definitely say if he keeps playing just the level he's playing, that he's a top 75 player. He'll get those props, you know, coming next time they release that round. And I think you probably got to give the biggest one that no one really talks about here is that Steve Kerr. Okay, Steve Kerr, if he gets his 4th ring here, okay, and if they can maybe keep rolling, get that 5th, that ties what the Spurs did, maybe even get that 6th. That window is probably wide enough now at this point with the youth that's still there to talk about a 6th, you know, sort of ring here. That now you're tying that with the Bulls run that they had in the 90s. That Steve Kerr was part of both runs there. That's you know, the credit to him there. That you know, shit, he could have 12. He got 12 rings if they match that. Okay, and that's one more than Phil Jackson. So where would Steve Kerr sit in this sort of you know, in this coaching hierarchy? I think that's you know, up there near, you know, near Rushmore, right?
It's a double whammy, right? Because you've mentioned the Spurs piece, and then I guess the Spurs did it for 15 years. So their first title and their last title, I believe, are 15 years apart. So, and they also like maintained 50 wins. I think never missed a playoffs. There's a lot of crazy stuff. Obviously, Golden State won't get that continuity because of the injury year, where they just kind of went full tank / everyone was injured. But yeah, you're right. Like if they go, let's say, when was the first finals appearance? 2015, 2014. If they can get to 2024, 2026, and they're still very competitive in that Western Conference landscape, then that's the Spurs dynasty, depending on what they do. Yeah, you're right as well with the Steve Kerr thing. He's kind of like the reverse Phil Jackson, right? He gets more as a player and then almost matches it as a coach. So he'd be in a difference here. You know, his win percentage would be ridiculous. I believe he's never lost a playoff series, or if he has, it was one, right? You know, before the finals, so to speak. And then, you know, you look at the legacy, the one black mark will be dropping the 3-1, right? Because I don't think people will hold the Toronto series against them. You lose 2 players of that caliber with the injuries, you know, what are you supposed to do? It'd be lucky. And they were 4-2 anyway. And so it was at least competitive. But it'd be the 3-1 as the black mark. But, you know, I guess there's conversation about that, right? Draymond gets suspended, Bogut gets injured. There's things that occur that help the momentum sort of shift as well. So it's yeah, it's definitely, I guess, the Spurs-esque quietness of the dynasty as well, because I think everyone wanted another narrative. I think we wanted Giannis to get a second and start cementing himself as a greatest. We want Jason Tatum or Jimmy Butler to get their vindication and get their first. We wanted Phoenix just to get their first title as a franchise. You want Luka to do something crazy, but it seems like every storyline that we wanted to happen, or the media wants to push, ultimately it boils down to Golden State's actually just the best team, and that's just how it's going to play out for the next couple of years.
Look, I just Googled quickly. I got a bit excited for Steve Kerr. He got 5 rings as a player. He was obviously not there for 6 rings at the Bulls. All right, so he got 5 rings as a player. So if Golden State get 6, then that's still 3 more to go. Okay, but if they get 6, sorry, 2 more to go. Sorry, if they get 6, that obviously he would tie Phil Jackson in that sort of ring count. And I think look, in a ideal world here, and there's probably some things that have to occur. Obviously, things like, say, these core players that are superstars in their own right, will they take a little bit less money? Are they always going to be seeking that max that they're probably entitled to, but perhaps as their age simply does not match their production at any point? And I'm not saying obviously Clay and Steph, their production's going to drop off, especially as shooters. But the reality is that they can probably extend their career by simply, and they've already had some injuries, let's be clear, especially Clay, some quite severe injuries there too, that instead of being asked to play 30 to 35 minutes a night, what if that range was closer to the 25-minute mark over the course of a 82-game season? And they've got the right pieces in place to put those minutes somewhere else. That's Jordan Poole right now. Give him an extra 5 to 10 minutes a game throughout the course of the season. The production's still going to be there. He's only going to get better. Okay, they got Moody obviously still that's developing on the bench that really hasn't got much credit, but the kid can play. I think he's shown some real flashes there that can they find him more of a role? Again, like I said before, Kuminga sort of taking over from Green, obviously in Draymond at some point, and it's a whole different style of play, no doubt. Don't get me wrong, but he's definitely looks like he's going to have a long and productive career. Okay, and then you got Wiggins, who's sort of that bridge in between everything. That clearly, has shown he doesn't need to be that alpha player. That he can sort of modify his game to be productive in whatever is being asked. And I think it's been really nice to see that. I think there was a huge narrative on Wiggins, how much of a bust almost he was. The fact that they're going to play all the way now into June, and Wiggins is the core part of that success. I think it's really been positive to see that. So, look, I think all said and done here, these Warriors, if they can pick up this ring this year, they're really going to sort of take themselves in that conversation of the Lakers in the 2000s, the Spurs obviously, and the Bulls obviously in the 90s. I think they put themselves right there in that sort of conversation, and a few more rings will probably take them above them.
Well, I guess one more thing that I want to sneak in before we wrap it up is obviously contracts. You look at Golden State, and some of the success has been based off getting players at the right time for contracts. So you've got Jordan Poole, Gary Payton, very, very cheap, and then you've got Wiggins on an interesting deal. And when he comes time to resigning, I'm not sure if it's 2 or 3 years still to go, but can he start demanding more because there's a bit of success behind his name? Klay Thompson is getting paid a lot for a guy that I think it's okay to say after an Achilles and an ACL will not be the same defensively and offensively. He has his moments. He'll be a great spot-up shooter, but he would need to relinquish that role. And that would be the comparison as well to the Spurs, because I think that was something the Spurs successfully navigated a lot of the time. They kept that core together, and they reduced their salaries year after year. And you do vibe that the Golden State guys have had a great career and probably owe a lot to the franchise that they could give it back. But younger guys like Jordan Poole, that clearly Detroit would be happy to throw a $30 million per year contract at. It's the resistance on those kind of things. Same for Kuminga and same for Moody, right? They're not going to get a lot of playing time for these 2-3 years, but there'll be glimpses of potential that another team would happily throw 15-20 mil at. So those will probably be the most likely ways that Golden State could be undone, is actually probably through the contract market.
I think that's the question every free agent player, especially one that's up and coming, or obviously coming off the rookie contract, has to sort of ask themselves that question: are they in it to win, or are they in it for the money? and which one is more important to them as a balance. I think so. It'll be really interesting to see that. But they're in a good spot, and be fun to watch them.